hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, great. We're having some technical difficulties with getting our doctor in from Canada. So, all right, so I'm Tiffany Hatton. I am the president and one of the founders of Parents' Choice LA, and we're so excited to have you guys here tonight. So, first thing that we're going to do is we're going to open up with prayer. Mr. Lance Weatherby is going to open us up with prayer and the Pledge of Allegiance. So.
Go ahead and do the pledge, okay?
Okay.
I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Well, thank you all so much for coming. We say a quick little prayer. We're so grateful that everybody showed up tonight, and let's just open up a prayer real quick. If y'all would bow your heads. Father God, Lord, we just lift you up right now, Lord. Just grateful and thankful for this time together. We just thank you for all these people here and like-minded individual, Lord, that are seeking you. We just ask your presence in this time. Just thank you for these experts and that are here to speak with us tonight, Lord Jesus. And we just ask you just to guide our hearts and our ears tonight. Thank you for everything you've done for us, Lord Jesus. Thank you for dying on the cross, and thank you for eternal life. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Okay, so I just wanted to introduce some of our guests that are here tonight. So we have Representative Danny McCormick. He will be speaking with us toward the end. We have Ms. Jill Hines with Health Freedom Louisiana. We have Ms. Jen Carrigan with Louisiana State Representative with us. And we're ready to get started. Mr. Woody Jenkins is also going to be coming on. Well, I don't know if he's on. So what we're going to do right now is we're going to go ahead and let Representative Danny McCormick start us out. And then as we get Dr. Paul Alexander fixed on the computer, then we'll pick up with him.
How y'all doing tonight? Good. It's good to see y'all. I appreciate y'all coming tonight. I was supposed to go last, and I procrastinated, so I was going to write my notes while the doctors were speaking. So I'm freelancing. I'm a father. I'm a grandfather, and I love liberty.
Amen.
And I look out there tonight, and I see myself just a few years ago. That's what I see sitting in this audience. Probably about 2015, I kind of give you my testimony how I got here. The people that from back home, they know my testimony, you don't. I think it's important for me to share with you how I got here today. That's important. In 2015, the economy crashed in Louisiana, and the state of Louisiana raised the taxes on my small business, on my expenses, by $35,000 a year. I was aggravated by that. Oh, okay, that's good. If they get ready, I'll interrupt my testimony and I'll finish it later. Okay, I just look there. I just cured all the problems. Thank y'all. I'll finish it later. I'll write some notes.
Dr. Paul, we're so thankful for you being with us this evening. So just a quick introduction of Dr. Paul Alexander. He's an expert in epidemiology. He received his PhD from McMaster University. He's worked for the WHO and the U.S. Health Human Services as an evidence synthesis consultant and senior COVID pandemic advisor. Dr. Paul is going to be presenting this evening his expert opinion on the shot, masking, and how these medical interventions are affecting our children. And we're so honored to have you here with us, Dr. Paul. Thank you so much.
society as a whole, the closed schools, etc., was the wrong approach. We being me and some other people in the administration, we began to argue for a more age-risk stratified approach where we could tailor the approach to respond to COVID based on someone's age and their risk profile, and not an across-the-board lockdown and school closure and mask mandates as advocated by the President Trump, the task force that you saw on stage every day. So it was kind of a battle behind the scenes between really some of us in the administration and that task force and the President, in the sense that you saw basically a fight where it became apparent at a certain point that the President was trying to open the society and open schools while there was a push to keep things closed. And that was something that was very, very devastating because I was one of the people behind the scenes with Dr. Scott Atlas, etc. Fighting with who we could fight with, making the case, trying to make the case that the lockdowns would have been devastating and it would kill more people than the virus and the disease, and that the school closures would harm many, many children, and that the mask mandates were ineffective and did not work and would not work. So it was a constant fight because...
Recording in progress.
Because it became apparent that this quickly moved from a public health situation and became a political situation very early on. And it was just very difficult. And the long and short of it is, when we look at all of the evidence today, from the beginning of the response, even into the new administration, and we look at all of the evidence across the world, in every country, in every setting, in every county of the United States, in any setting, we find that in no situation, none, did lockdowns work to reduce spread or reduce deaths. In fact, lockdowns were catastrophic. Yeah. Lockdowns caused more harm and more devastation to not just to the economy, but to individuals and to societies. We also found, when we looked at the data and all of the evidence across the world today, that all of the instances of school closures were catastrophic failures. None of them worked in no location, none. And they harmed and killed many children. And we also found that the mask mandates, using the United States as an example in several countries, we found in no instance in any country or in any state of America did mask mandates work to curb transmission or reduce deaths. In fact, we found that whenever mask mandates, wherever were implemented, the infection skyrocketed, followed by a hospitalization curve and then a death curve. So it just did not work. And the challenge is that what we saw was that these bureaucrats and technocrats in governments across the world, including America, across different states, they responded by not broadening their advice and the task forces or the advisors that they had, realizing that they were making, what they were doing was wrong, it was not working. They responded by saying, we need more of it. So they hardened it and locked down even harder and longer. And what they did not understand, which we explained to them many times and we showed them, and we showed their scientists this, but we grew to realize it was either that they were not understanding the science, or they were not reading the science, or they were just blinded to the science, and because of their political biases and just the politics, that they just did not want to understand that when you lock the society down, you actually harm the society, because the approach that we've used across decades that was always worked in epidemics and pandemics was you strongly protect the vulnerable first. That's the key. So we are talking about the elderly in your homes and the elderly in our nursing homes, long-term facilities, assisted living, etc. You protect them properly. You use creative means, every possible means you can. And whilst you protect the elderly strongly, the lower risk part of your society, the younger, healthier persons, even middle-aged and even older persons who are healthier, they live largely unfettered lives with as least interference and disruption as possible. And the society has to go on. And that has worked time and time again. And Dr. Donald Henderson, who helped eradicate smallpox in the 1970s, he wrote a seminal paper in 2006 reminding governments that you do not disrupt the society, you do not lock it down, you do not mass test asymptomatic people, you do not mass test people at the border, you do not confine and quarantine asymptomatic people. That is very harmful. You test and you quarantine people who are symptomatic, who are ill, and there's a strong suspicion of clinical illness. But you do not take low-risk asymptomatic people and you subject them to mass testing or mass quarantine or closures. So we did the opposite. And what we did was we locked down the healthy in society and we failed to protect the vulnerable. So exactly what we were supposed to do, we did the opposite. And we found out quickly, and we tried to get governments in the different states to respond, was that our nursing homes became like killing fields because the staff was bringing the infection in. And we kept telling people, you need to stop the staff and you need to come up with different models. Because not blaming the staff, because a lot of the staff were very poor and a lot of them held multiple jobs and they moved around to different facilities. So they inadvertently brought infection in. So there were models in other European countries that could work. And I'm focusing on this because our nursing homes, our age homes remains a foci of death still. There are models where you get staff to stay for 2 weeks at a time. Those that can't, you still pay them, let them stay at home. You bring in nursing students in, who want the funds and the experience, etc. But you take steps to minimize staff leaving during an outbreak in the facility. Or you take steps constantly to reduce them bringing infection in. So all of these things that we learned, what's the reality today? Well, the reality today is we shifted the burden from the affluent, we call the cafe latte, laptop class, the affluent people in society, and we shifted the burden to the poor and the minorities in society and those least able to afford to shield or to lock down. Those people who had to hold the front line, lower paying jobs, who had to serve the society. And they did so willingly and they did so glowingly, but they paid at their price. Many of them were infected and died, whilst the higher class society stayed home. They enjoyed the remote working, they enjoyed ordering from Uber, they enjoyed walking their dog daily, reading, catching up on some books, taking some little vacations. So they enjoyed the lockdowns of this whole pandemic. In fact, we know of many who are actually upset with society. Some parts are reopening and the move is to reopen society because they've gotten into really nice cadence. It is the poor in society, the women in society, the poor women, the minorities, the blacks in society, the brown people in society who suffer the most and pay their price, especially poor children. Poor children pay the dearest price in this situation, in this pandemic, and they still do. And today, you know, we thought that somebody like myself, you know, we've been writing a lot and speaking and being interviewed, etc. And I thought the pandemic response was the worst thing. It couldn't get worse than that. And I thought that even though I worked for the administration, and remember, this is not a political thing for me because even though I was asked by President Trump's administration to join, I joined. I mean, you know, I'm a minority from where I speak. A lot of my family on my mother's side is colored, etc. So this is part of me. when I joined the administration, I saw a lot of good things President Trump did. I made the decision to go to Washington because of things I found out, and I saw the good efforts to lift the plight of the minority community and to improve the economic situation in the country. That appealed to me. I like the economic empowerment zones. I like the push at the talk of it about law and order and these issues. I appreciated all of those things. I appreciated that poor people were given a chance and at least had some prospect for a brighter future. And I made my decision that in all of the past presidents, 6, 7, 8 in my lifetime that I saw, President Trump was actually doing more for the colored community, minority community, for women that I saw others talk about and just failed to do. Now, I also, even though I appreciated what he did, and I'll be blunt, I'll be very honest for disclosure, I supported him and I made the decision to work for him, and I still do support him. But I think his pandemic response was a failure, and it was a failure because of the task force that he assembled around, and not all, but many of them worked tirelessly against President Trump. And there was a fight constantly behind the scenes. The public wasn't privy to it, but there was the constant battle against him as he pushed to open the society and open schools. And it was a horrible thing to witness, because you just couldn't wrap your head around why would scientists and public health officials be fighting to remediate the situation. And the reality about it is, you saw it play out daily. It was like a clown car at times. And the reality about it is that we, the United States, the United States leads the world, and the rest of the countries in the world followed America. So how the United States emerges from this eventually is how the rest of the world will emerge. And the rest of the world locked down, closed schools, masks, after the United States. So pretty much, they looked at what the task force, remember, everything that Trump did, he did it on advisement from his task force. He was not an expert. He took advisement from them. He made decisions based on their best advice to him. But where I have stepped off and stepped back is I could say that as the CEO and running the country, at a certain point, I expected him to make a lot of changes in the government, because the task force was advising him wrong. Similarly to how the task force is advising the present administration wrong. So, if the present administration had asked me, or even if President Obama had asked me in their administrations to serve, I would have served. This is not a Trump thing or a Democrat or Republican thing. For me, it's a scientific thing. But I did appreciate things that he did. I do see that there were a lot of mistakes and failures. And to me, where we are today as a society is, we need, you see, the power, I've realized, really rests in the people. But the people have ceded a lot of their decision making to these alphabet agencies who really don't have the legal authority. So when the CDC comes out and makes a statement or issues guidance, what the public does not understand is guidance is just guidance. It's not an enabling act. It's not an enabling law. It has no legal teeth. So the CDC operates as though when it issues a statement, that this is a legal statement. That's just guidance for whomever to listen to and decide to follow or not. A lot of the guidance the CDC has given was junk and failed the society. And you watch it play out every day. They're flip-flopping and going backwards and changing things. They can't get any statements correct. So the society is being ill-served by people right now who, this is not a public health response, this is a political response. So they are making decisions based on politics. And all we want as a society, just pure honesty. I just want the data and the facts. We want no spin. We just want to know exactly what's going on so that I as an individual in a free society, I can make my informed decision. The problem right now is everybody has ceded their decision making to places like the CDC and the NIH, when if you listen to these people, nothing that they're saying is backed by science. And the problem is that persons like myself, Dr. Peter McCullough, Dr. Harvey Reich out of Yale, our problem is a decision was made to block us out of the discussion because the science is on our side. We don't have a problem with the science. The problem is we are not allowed to discuss the science. It's like we are off limits. So the public is being informed half of the story, and the half of the story being informed is often wrong. So I'll give you an example. Right now, we are facing the prospect of the CDC, the NIH, the FDA, the NIAID, these medical experts, the vaccine developers are making a push to implement vaccination of children 5 to 11. Now, when we look at the data, and we really look at the evidence across the world, what we know have accumulated for 18, 19 months now is that the risk to children from SARS-CoV-2/COVID disease is statistically 0. A 5 to 11-year-old healthy child brings almost 0 risk to the table. That child, if they were infected, will more likely than not go on to have no symptoms or very mild symptoms and recover fully well and go on with their lives. That child, and that's a fact, that's 18 months of data. That's data that we have. I'll give you an example. We have data that shows us, let's say mask use as an example. Well, let's say the risk for children. There was a very important study done in the mid to 3/4 of 2020 in Sweden, where they looked at all of the children in Sweden all of the children up to 16 years old, so kindergarten, primary school, secondary school, up to 16 years old, all of them. So approximately 1.95 million children, 2 million kids. And they looked at these children within the height of the pandemic. And they followed them, all of them. There were no lockdowns, there were no school closures, and there was no mask mandates. And they documented 0 instances of death, 0. We have a study out of the French Alps by Danny McCormick that we looked at one child. It's a seminal study, and I'm bringing up the key studies for you, that the media does not talk about because they don't want you to know the truth and the fact. Right. So I'm telling you, this one study in the French Alps was a pioneering study. It was a positive symptomatic child, 9 years old, around the middle to the 3/4 of 2020, who moved around to 3 separate schools in France and contaminated approximately 120 other kids and teachers. What we found is there was not one instance of secondary spread, none, 0. So we began to see very early on, everything that the news were telling us was actually flat wrong. We had a study coming out of China around 3/4 of 2020 with a base sample of 10 million people. And we looked at these people published in the journal Nature. Very important study, very seminal, and it focused on asymptomatic spread. The reason why I bring this study up is asymptomatic spread was used, the concept of asymptomatic spread, to lock the society down and to get us to mask. Well, they found very early on, but this study was covered up and hidden. Nobody speaks about it. It was published in a high-level journal Nature, and what they found was all of the contacts of the persons in this study, 10 million persons base sample, they followed them up with strong contact tracing. and they found not one instance of secondary transmission. And this study came out very early that could have affected all these these lockdowns that we were implementing and school closures, because it informed us very, very early that the concept of asymptomatic spread was actually very rare and almost non-existent. Even Fauci stated that in around March of April 2020 in a video conference that's on the internet, YouTube, go on, you can find it, where he stated that asymptomatic spread is actually very rare, if at all, and does not drive the pandemic. Yet, the governments told us, because of asymptomatic spread, you needed to lock down. They told you that you, looking healthy as you were, going about your daily life, that you could be asymptomatically infected, and you could be spreading it. But you're looking at yourself and you say, but I'm fine, I'm not sick. But they told you, don't think like that. You might be infected, you might be asymptomatic. But we knew that was a bogus assertion. But we had people across America and the world running around thinking, well, you know, I want to do something good for society. And they've just told me, Dr. Fauci told me that I might be infected and I'm spreading it to my neighbors and my children. And Dr. Fauci knew that he was deceiving the public. He understood the concept of asymptomatic spread. We also knew that recurrent infection was non-existent, if at all. So when they came out and said, you know, if you were infected with SARS-CoV-2, you could be reinfected again, we knew that it was bogus what Fauci and the task force was saying. We've looked at the data up to today, and we cannot find one of the billions of people in this world, of the hundreds of millions in America who have been infected. We cannot find one documented case, published, one instance, one of bona fide reinfection where somebody was infected type 1 and you could show me that they were bona fide reinfected type 2 with a proper distance between them, with proper testing. And I'm not talking about the flawed PCR testing that we also know is almost 90 to 100% false positive because we overcycled the test. That's another thing. We realized early that they used this PCR test, they overcycled the test. They knew that a cycle count threshold, you know, I mean, I don't want to get into too much into the fine detail, but you have to amplify the sample that you take from the person and you run it through the machine, and every amplification you double it, you keep doubling it, because the sample is often very small viral particles. So you want to amplify it, keep amplifying each cycle until you can compare it to the background sample. We knew that if you cycle that test over 20 times, that the chance of you finding infectious COVID virus, culturable, viable, problematic, lethal virus is zero. We knew from 20 cycles onwards. From the time you hit 25 and 30 cycles, you would be testing positive, but for viral dust, viral fragments, old coronavirus from common colds, not SARS-CoV-2. Even the make of the test told them this. Yet we had the CDC cycling at 40 and 45. We had Canada cycling at 45. That meant almost 100% of the tests were false positive. So when the news was reporting to us every day, 50,000 new infections, 75,000, we need to close schools. We knew, people like myself knew, that this was bogus, that we were overcycling the test, and we were messing with the minds of the public. We were locking the society down needlessly. We were closing schools and harming children. Let me explain to you something. When President Trump came on the podium, and you saw him fighting with Fauci and Birx and these people, and he was pleading with them to open schools, and he was pleading with the states, open the country, open the society. Many people thought it was, oh, this is a political year, so he's campaigning. No. Maybe there was part of it in that. But what President Trump was seeing, we were getting data and reports coming up from the states where business owners were hanging themselves in America. But the news media would not report it. Why? Because he was asking to open his society. So had they reported what we were seeing, the actual data, then they would give him credence. So they had to pretend and sweep it under the rug. We were getting daily reports of employees in those businesses that were closed and people laid off who committed suicide across America. We were getting daily reports of children, young children, committing self-harming, 300-400% increase, and committing suicide. It was shocking and it was horrible. So it was a real fight with that task force. And we had to fight the states to open, and they will not open. And they did not open. And they prolonged and they hardened the lockdowns. And they hardened the school closures. Like how the CDC and the teachers' unions are still in twisted relationships in certain parts. You see, to really talk about COVID, an informed person like myself have to digress a little bit into the politics, because politics and COVID right now is the same thing. It's so interwoven, I can't unravel the science from the politics anymore. But there is science in COVID, but right now it's still being battered with this politics. We have places in America with schools closed. There's no sound justification, none, to keep a school closed, to keep a child away from school. The school is the safest place for a child. The median age of teachers in America is 41. Teachers are in the safest place in a school setting, unmasked, free, in a school setting, children running free play, open society, breathing fresh air. Right now we're damaging our children irreparably with this masking and stuff. There's no science, there's no clinical research, none today, that shows masks are effective in children, none. They all know, the CDC knows this, all of the science shows that these blue surgical masks and these white masks are ineffective. In fact, it's toxic, it's damaging to our children, and we are weakening their immune systems, because their immune system needs to be free. It needs to be tuned up and taxed daily. Children need to be breathe fresh air, so pathogens can enter their innate, their mucosal immune system, and be tuned up and challenged. We are weakening it, and we are going to see children presenting in hospitals in the future with all sorts of illnesses that we had gotten under control. But what we're doing now is devastating to them, and bringing back full circle now to the vaccine. The story, the situation is this: children bring no risk to the table, none, no appreciable risk. But the vaccine brings no benefit to children. Yet, we have clear evidence now that the vaccine brings harms to adults. We have some adults who've taken these vaccines and have not fared well. The vaccine works well for a lot of people, but there's a portion of people that the vaccine does not work, and we just do not know who they are. And that's the argument, because the vaccine developers did not run the proper studies. They failed to conduct the safety arm of the study. We needed 10 to 12 to 15 years of safety surveillance to understand the vaccine properly. We needed to exclude harms. That's a very important phrase, to exclude harms. And that's why you run the trial for so long, and you follow up the safe arm of the trial, the safe phase. Because you want to be able to say, we followed this vaccine for 15 years, and these were the harms, and these harms are manageable and tolerable, so we could mass vaccinate and population-wide vaccine program. Versus, we found harms that were so detrimental that we need to pull it. Listen, in 1976, 1977, with the swine flu pandemic, that didn't really turn out to be a pandemic in the end, we vaccinated about 45 million Americans. Gerald Ford was president, and about 25 died from the vaccine. When those 25 people died, the vaccine program was stopped immediately. And there was a reason for that. Now, the reality is this. Right now we have 17,000 deaths registered in CDC's VAERS database, vaccine reporting database. We had a threshold of 25 deaths in America. The FDA as a limit to pull a vaccine from the society. Right now we have 17,000 deaths, and the VAERS database, the reporting is about 1% captures the actual reports. So think about what I'm saying here. Something is very wrong, but something is catastrophically wrong when you push now to vaccinate your children. Children bring near zero risk. The vaccine has potential, vaccine has harms as you see in adults. The vaccine also has shown harms of myocarditis, cerebrovascular thrombosis. For young people also, we've had reports of Guillain-Barré, we've had blood clot reports, bleeding reports. So the question becomes, why would I now, as a parent, allow you to vaccinate my child when my child brings near zero risk to the table? My child is fine, healthy now. My child has a natural immunity, a natural innate immunity that will vanquish anything to throw at the immune system, anything. But you want me now to subject them to a vaccine that A, could be harmful to them. You're seeing it's harmful in other persons, adults. It's in the news. It's not my data. It's known data. You want me to put my child at that risk as a parent when the CDC and the NIH, Dr. Fauci, and they have not prosecuted a case as to why my child should be vaccinated. No one. Plus, this is another thing I fault President Trump for. He gave those vaccine developers and the FDA and everyone involved under the PrEP Act liability protection. So he absolved them from liability. I am saying here, you as parents, there's one message I can take. If these people yesterday voted to bring this vaccine, you need to now stand up and say, okay, stop. We will have a conversation on this vaccine with our children, but you put liability protection on the table. If you think, Dr. Fauci and Dr. Walensky from the CDC, if you think these vaccines are safe, you put liability protection on the table and remove it. Remove the protection that you have. Yeah. Because right now the only person at risk is my child. And if my child gets harmed by the vaccine and dies, you're not going to be liable. So remove the protection that you have, and I will now consider. I would, if Fauci and Walensky and Francis Collins remove the liability, I will vaccinate my child, because I know they wouldn't. Yeah. Because I know they understand these vaccines have some harm and some risk. So you need to stand up now and say, liability protection off the table. And then we will talk about vaccinating my child. But if I have to tell you my view, based on the entire science today, there's absolutely no reason. There's no science, there's no data, none, zero, that supports a 5 to 11-year-old today, a healthy child, being vaccinated with these vaccines. These vaccines provide children no opportunity for benefit and only the opportunities for harm. And I would urge you to think about it and go and read. There's enough out there. Don't just listen to CNN and Fox, even Fox. Switch them all off. Yeah. Talk to each other and you read. You will be able to inform. I have found the general public are smarter than all these so-called scientists. You read and inform yourself and you make the decision, because your child needs you today to protect them. Not because the CDC or the news media or people on Fox or people on CNN telling you, roll up your child's sleeve and give them the jab, that you just do it. Do not trust those people with the lives of your children. They have often failed.
Hi, I'm Jill Hines. I'm co-director of Health Freedom Louisiana. Thank you so much for that incredible presentation. I had a couple of questions for you, but you marked them off as you went through your presentation. You covered So much material. Thank you so very much. I do have one quick question for you, though, if you don't mind. Can you clarify, in the United States at this moment, do we have an FDA-approved vaccine available to the residents here?
No. There is no FDA-approved vaccine.
Can you, for about a minute, can you clarify that? Why is the product that we have here in the United States, why is it not FDA approved?
Good question.
Well, I mean, we could talk about it at the 50,000 foot level or the granular level, but let me just say it this way. Before the FDA could approve a drug or medical device or vaccine, it needs to go through proper research and proper follow-up where they get enough data to make a judgment on the efficacy and the safety. Remember, they brought these vaccines to market in months. They did not have the efficacy data and they did not have the safety data. So the FDA could not grant a full, we call it BLA, biologic licensing. They could not grant that, and they knew it. So they came up with a scheme to grant an emergency use authorization. But remember, even that approach that was used is wrong. And look, I have been involved with the administration, and I've been open here telling you I did support President Trump. I also told you my reservations as to what has happened here. I don't approve of these vaccines. And I'll tell you bluntly, the issue here is this. For something to be granted emergency use authorization, the FDA has violated its own regulations. Two things must be in place. One, it must be an emergency. And two, it must have no other alternative. Right now, from the beginning, even if you want to just talk about the children here, this is not an emergency for children. The burden from seasonal influenza is greater, or respiratory syncytial virus, than COVID. So it's not that type of emergency. So it doesn't meet that criteria. And number two, to say that there's no other alternative, we know the alternatives. We have early treatment drugs that work. We have treatments that work already on deck. Moreover, children are normally very healthy and their natural immune system could deal with this effectively, very effectively. We do not need to provide a vaccine to deal with this SARS-CoV-2 issue. We do not. And I think that history will show, because I think at the end of all of this, we're going to have to go back and examine what happened here over these last couple of years and who did what. And we will show, it will be shown that just the granting of the EAE was wrong. It had no basis, because it had not even for the adults in the society. I would make the argument, I would argue with anyone, that even for the general society, we could have dealt with this with no vaccine. So in terms of, when they authorized this meeting they had a couple of months ago, and they came out and said, oh, we've given full approval to this other vaccine called Comity or something like that. What the public doesn't understand is that was just a scheme to give a talking point for the media to run with. So you could think that the vaccine that you were getting and did get has been approved, so now you will take more shots. But that commodity does not even exist. You can't even get it. It's not available. So it's just a big game. That's why I said the public needs to read and to talk and to share and make their own informed decisions. Because what we're getting from these alphabet agencies is flat wrong. We're getting spin and lies. And it's very dangerous.
Thank you again. Thank you so very much. Powerful information. I know that we are empowered by having it, and we can speak more eloquently and knowledgeably with our legislators because of you. Thank you so very much.
Okay, so next up we have Ms. Jill Hines, the co-director of Health Freedom LA, and she's going to give you some presentation about revised statute 17170.
Hello again. My name is Jill Hines. I'm co-director of Health Freedom Louisiana. We are a consumer and human rights advocacy organization. Are my slides up? That works. Thank you guys for being so patient with all of our technical difficulties. Zooming in a position from Canada has been quite a challenge, so thank you for hanging with us.
Y'all want me to tell another story?
Working out all the kinks this time for next time.
That's definitely where you don't want me. I don't want to be on the technology. I'll tell you one of those quick stories. I like telling people this story. I was raised in the oil field of North Cattle Parish, you know. When I got ready to run for office, I had to go buy a suit coat. I didn't even own one. And I didn't own a tie until after I won. So, you know, I have to love the people to actually put this coat on and put on a tie and go to Baton Rouge and deal with those people. It's an interesting thing down there with people. I have, and I will say something, I met Jill down there, and she's been a terrific asset to me. In the first of 2020, this was when Trump still, remember, in the spring of 2020, Trump was still the president. We had no idea Biden was going to be a president. No. Jill helped me run a couple of bills.
He's still not.
Jill helped me run a couple of bills. One bill I ran was that you couldn't make the COVID-19 vaccine mandatory. Now, this was in the spring of 2020. And they were telling me, this is a problem looking, this is a solution looking for a problem. I said, guys, I'm telling you, I know these people. I said, there's tens of billions. I said, no, not tens of billions. There's hundreds of billions of dollars at stake. They will make this COVID-19 vaccine mandatory. And needless to say, I'm not proud of the fact, but it was right that we knew it was coming. Are y'all ready yet? 30 seconds. 30 seconds. All right. The next bill I run. Now, this was a simple bill, okay? This bill, and if you go to school, I may be stealing some of Jill's got more information on this. There's exemptions where you don't have to take a vaccine, your child doesn't, to go to school. And all we wanted to do was just take and put that exemption on the information that the parents got at school. They voted that bill down. The question you have to ask yourself, why wouldn't they want the information? It's law. Why wouldn't they want that information available to the parents?
Right.
Well, this is what they think. You know, we're so much smarter than those people. And we need to make this decision for them. If we put it on there, they may make a bad decision. And we have to hide this information. They actually made the argument that you should be able to go to the Louisiana Department of Health website, even though you don't know that exists, and even though you don't know the exemption exists, and find this exemption. So there is a lot of money behind those decisions. And I turn it back over to Jill, which is way smarter than me on any of that.
Danny, thank you so much. He carried two of our bills for us. Actually, it was last fall. October 6th is when we presented them.
Okay.
We were talking about them in the spring, but we presented them on October 6th. The bill that Danny introduced, he sponsored, that would have prohibited a COVID-19 vaccine mandate, which is what we're experiencing here in the state now. Even if Biden had passed an executive order, if that bill had passed, it would have been law right now, and our employees in the state of Louisiana would not be forced to be vaccinated or submit a religious exemption. It got 2 votes in the House Health and Welfare Committee. 2 votes.
Who was that?
Those meetings are recorded.
They're recorded, yeah. They're recorded. Who were the 2 votes? We got one from Representative
These
Cruz.
are ones that voted for my bill.
They voted for
Raymond
his
Cruz
bill. Raymond Cruz and
Julie
Julie Emerson. Representative Emerson were the only 2 that voted for
Those
that.
are the good guys.
And then the other bill that Danny's referring to, we called it the copy-paste bill, because you literally had to copy-paste one section of law where it was already in law and put it in the other section of law where it needs to be, so that parents could be informed of their rights, and it only got 3 votes. 3 votes. So very disappointing, but so courageous of you to carry those bills. I think our legislature is afraid of being deemed anti-vaccine, but at this point in the road, we need to be pro-freedom and anti-mandate. At this point, that's what we need to do. So let me get on with my presentation really quickly. Let's go on to slide 2. We're talking about RS 17170, specifically Section E. RS stands for Revised Statute, meaning this is in law. And in this case, Louisiana is number 1. We're last in everything, but in this instance, Louisiana has the best exemption law in the country. It's something to be proud of. We really respect parental rights when it comes to what is best for your child. You get to make that decision. So RS 17170 Section E allows you the opportunity to choose which vaccinations are appropriate for your child. So which students does it cover? All of them. All of them. From preschool, daycare, Mother's Day out if it's more than 24 hours a week, all the way through residency if your son or daughter is going to be a doctor, through clinicals if they're in nursing school. If they're a student in a college or university in Louisiana, they are covered by 17170E. What does it say? It says that any person that enters the school may exempt from the necessary requirements to be vaccinated. So any requirement that a school has for a vaccination requirement, you can exempt from them. Provisions of 17170. This state law provides protection for our children against a vaccine mandate, like the ones that our employees are experiencing right now. Schools cannot decide if an exemption is valid or not. They have to accept an exemption. And no explanation is needed. Written dissent is all that's required. An explanation of your religious beliefs or philosophical explanation is not necessary. So on October 14th of this year, I sent a letter to Dr. Courtney Phillips, who's the Secretary of Health with the Louisiana Department of Health. And in my 14-page letter, I explained to her that the current university and college and university policies that are taking place right now violate that state law in 4 different ways. The first issue is that the state law allows for a student to submit evidence of prior immunity. What is one thing that has been noticeably excluded from students is them allowing students to provide evidence of prior immunity, an antibody test, a titer test. They have excluded that. That violates state law. So while the statute provides that colleges and universities may require immunizations or proof of immunity more extensive than required by the schedule approved by the Office of Public Health, it does not say that they can accept anything less. And so to date, Louisiana colleges and universities have excluded evidence of immunity to SARS-CoV-2. Second is the issue of vaccine preventable diseases. Is COVID-19 vaccine preventable? No. Well, based on recent CDC data, vaccinated people who do get infected have just as much virus in their system as unvaccinated people, meaning they can likely spread the virus simply because of the power of the Delta variant. And that, of course, is a quote from our governor from August 2nd, the day that he implemented the mask mandate in the state. So, if vaccinated people can transmit and be infected by SARS-CoV-2, and if vaccinated individuals can have as much virus in their bodies as an unvaccinated individual, then COVID-19 is not a vaccine-preventable disease. In my letter, I included 10 studies to corroborate that. Third, what is the consequence of submitting an exemption? The statute states that unvaccinated might be excluded in the event of an outbreak of a vaccine-preventable disease. Now remember, COVID-19 does not apply because it's not a vaccine-preventable disease. And further, the only people who should remain on campus are those who are recovered because they are immunized. What about masking and testing? Because statute specifies what might happen if you submit an exemption, it leaves nothing to the imagination or machinations of LDH. The Department of Health can only approve stricter admissions requirements, not consequences. Additional testing and masking of unvaccinated people violates this statute, as well as RS, Revised Statute 40-1159.7, which states, "Nothing contained herein shall be construed to abridge any right of a person 18 years of age or over to refuse to consent to medical or surgical treatment as his own person," as well as Louisiana Constitution, Article 1, Section 5, which states that every person shall be secure in his person, property, communications, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches, seizures, and invasions of privacy. And finally, RS 29736D states that even while under a declared public health emergency, nothing in the chapter on emergency powers shall be interpreted to diminish the rights guaranteed to all persons under the Declaration of Rights of the Louisiana Constitution or the Bill of Rights of the United States Constitution. This is important here. This chapter shall not violate Article 2, which is the distribution of powers, meaning the governor cannot make law. The mask mandate is not law. I concluded my letter to Dr. Phillips with this. The race to vaccinate Louisiana college and university students created chaos for students and parents who reached out to Health Freedom Louisiana. Letters and emails to students from universities excluded vital information regarding available exemptions and included burdensome and discriminatory testing and masking policies for those who did not comply. Unethical incentives like lotteries and direct payments, as well as limitations on freedom of movement and exclusion from Greek life and athletic events, were used to coerce students into getting this invasive medical procedure. There are serious human rights violations that need to be addressed. Coercion has no place in medicine or public health. History has taught us this valuable lesson, and yet despite universal treaties dedicated to medical ethics, the greater good argument was used to violate the God-given right of every Louisiana citizen to receive free and informed consent for an invasive medical procedure. The approval granted by LDH for colleges and universities to require COVID-19 vaccination for school attendance needs to be rescinded, as COVID-19 does not fit the definition of a vaccine-preventable disease. Discriminatory practices based upon COVID-19 vaccination status needs to end immediately. Students and parents need to be provided with accurate information on the risk associated with SARS-CoV-2 infection by age group in comparison to the risk associated with COVID-19 vaccination by age group. Vaccination, like any other medical procedure, should be an individual choice with no societal or political pressure. And that's why It's so important that you know your rights and protect your freedom. Thank you, guys. So while we're waiting for Woody Jenkins to add us on the Zoom call, I want to do a little introduction of Woody. I call Woody one of my COVID silver linings. He's one of the best things that's happened during this COVID madness. So I got to meet him. I was quoting him before I ever knew him or knew who he was. Article 1, Section 1 of the state's Constitution is one of my favorite things to quote. Do you guys know Article 1, Section 1 of the state's Constitution? It actually tells us what the origin and purpose of government is. It defines it in our state's Constitution, and that is to protect the rights of the individual. And Woody wrote that. So Woody was the longest standing member in the Louisiana State Legislature. He served in the House of Representatives for 28 years. And during that time, he helped draft the new Louisiana Constitution in 1974. So many of those statutes that I just read to you guys, Woody wrote. So it was such an honor when I finally got to meet him. I was kind of doing a fangirl. You know, most people have like rock stars or, you know, famous people that they like to follow, movie stars or whatever. I collect scientists and legislators. They're some of my favorite people. So is Woody on? He's not on just yet. Do we want to have
I just wanted to give Danny a proper introduction. So I met Danny for the first time in Shreveport at another town hall, and it was just him and I in the room at the time, and I walked up and he was like, I know you, and I was thinking, no, not yet. But I'm sure he's probably seen me in some videos or something. You know, I call it divine appointation, you know, it's biblical. But so just a little bit about State Representative Danny McCormick. He is a lifelong resident in North Caddo Parish, a small business owner. He and his wife Susan have been married for 38 years. They have 2 children and 6 grandchildren. Mr. McCormick has several years' experience as a successful grassroots organizer and has continued those efforts while serving in the legislature. Arrow, a network of tens of thousands of like-minded citizens across the state. He recently received the prestigious Statesman of the Year award from Young Americans for Liberty and is a firm believer in defending our constitutional rights. So please join me with a bold welcome for Louisiana State Representative Danny McCormick.
And when I walk up here, all technical difficulties will be solved again. I do want to share just a little story with you, kind of give you the history of my background. Like I said, I'm a small business owner, worked in the oil field my whole life. Never had any idea that I'd run for public office. Through a series of events, I started grassroots organizing. I told you. Y'all going to have that part down pat. And I present to you Woody Jenkins.
Woody, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Hello.
Hey, it's Tiffany Hatton here. We have an audience. We're ready to hear from you.
Hello, West Monroe and Louisiana and the whole rest of the world who's watching. I'm Woody Jenkins. I'm here in Baton Rouge in my office, and it's a great pleasure to be with all of you. You know, I grew up in the 1950s here in Baton Rouge, and what a different world it was. Everybody I was around and knew, all the men served in World War II, like my father, my principal, the bus driver, the pharmacist, my pastor, and they were real men. They had fought and sacrificed, they'd seen their buddies die, They knew and respected the things like our Bill of Rights and our Constitution. And they had fought for them, and they knew in their hearts what freedom meant. Unfortunately, we're a few generations away from that. But I really believe that what's happened the last 2 years, it's our Revolutionary War, it's our Civil War, it's our World War II.
Right.
This is when we are relearning as a people what the Constitution means and what the Bill of Rights means. And I think we're going to come out of this a lot stronger. Now, I really am so happy to be introduced by Jill. Jill, I just so appreciate your work that you're doing. You did steal a little bit of my thunder because you talked a lot about the law, but that's okay. I want to call to your attention, this is the Constitution of Louisiana. This is the 1975 edition. I like this one the best because it didn't have all the amendments that have come along since then. But I want to point out something in this Constitution. Over here in Article 12, Section 30, it's called Oath of Office. And here's what it says. Every official shall take the following oath or affirmation. I do solemnly swear or affirm that I will support the Constitution and laws of the United States and the Constitution and laws of this state, and that I will faithfully and impartially discharge and perform all the duties incumbent upon me as, and you state the name of your office, according to the best of my ability and understanding, so help me God. So in 1972, when I was sworn in as a young state representative, 24 years old, I took that oath. It's the same oath that John Bell Edwards took, our Attorney General, all of our legislators, to defend and uphold the state Constitution, which has many legal rights in it protected that are not in the U.S. Constitution. Every Constitution of every state is different. And we can't take away any of the rights in the federal Constitution, but we can protect additional rights, and that's, of course, what the Louisiana Constitution has done. But I want to refer you to something that Jill talked about, and that's Article 2. Because I think it's a much neglected, but very important part of the Constitution. It's Article 2, it's distribution of powers. And it says this, Section 1, 3 branches. The powers of government of the state are divided into 3 separate branches: legislative, executive, and judicial. Section 2, except as otherwise provided by this Constitution, not by statute, but by this Constitution, no one of these branches, or any person holding office in any one of them, shall exercise power belonging to either of the others. No person holding an office in one of those 3 branches can exercise powers belonging in the other 2 branches of government, except as may be provided in this Constitution, not by statute. So this is our real problem the last 2 years. There's a lot of problems that we recognize in the Bill of Rights and the Declaration of Rights, but beyond even that, we have a governor who has been operating outside the executive branch of government. And he's been trying to make laws. He can't make laws. He has no constitutional, statutory, or any other authority to make laws. In the legislative branch, it specifically says that the legislature shall make laws. But all over this state, we've had people, whether it's someone as you walk into Whole Foods telling you that wear a mask, it's the law, to our school board in Central just recently saying that the governor's orders to wear a mask, that's the law. Well, it's not the law. Laws are made by the legislature. Now, in 1972, I think it was, when the Emergency Powers Law was proposed in the legislature, the reason that it was proposed was that we had no real law defining the powers of a governor in an emergency, and there were all sorts of emergencies that happened, usually hurricanes or flooding in Louisiana. And so that bill came through the legislative process. I did not author the bill, but I ended up authoring a number of provisions in the bill. The first thing that it says in that Emergency Powers Act, it was introduced this way and it remains that way today, is that the governor, when he makes orders, they have the effect of law. And if you stop reading right there, you say, wow, he can just do anything he wants to, even though the Constitution says only the legislature can make law. But you have to go beyond that. The governor can make orders that have the effect of law. That's true, but let's think about what that means. Let's suppose a police officer pulls you over and says, madam, I see that you were going 20 miles over the speed limit. Would you mind showing me your license and your insurance and step out of the car, please? And when you step out, he smells alcohol on your breath and he proceeds to test you. And finally he says, Adam, I'm afraid that I'm going to have to put you under arrest. Place your hands behind your back. Now you see, that order, given the right circumstances, is a lawful order. It has the effect of law. It's not a law. He didn't make a law. What he's doing is he's enforcing the law by his order. That's all the first section of the Emergency Powers Act means. The governor can make orders pursuant to this statute that have the effect of law. And then it says what kind of orders he can make. He can make orders like closing roads, commandeering buildings, and there's a list of very specific things that he can do in an emergency. It's a finite list. There's no catch-all that says that he can do any and all other things that he might choose to do. The statute is spelled out by the legislature, enumerating things that he can do. If you look in that list, there's nothing about closing businesses. There's nothing about locking down the state. There's nothing about ordering masks. That's not in the statute, in the Emergency Powers Act. But you know, when you get on television every day, day after day after day for 3 hours, and you tell people that you have the authority to do these things, and you're doing these things, and it goes unchallenged in the media, people begin to think that you have the power to do it, regardless of what the Constitution says, regardless of what the statute says. If you go through that Emergency Powers Act, there are a lot of things in it, such as the power of the legislature by either house to terminate an emergency. And by the way, you know, the governor, when the House of Representatives signed a petition to terminate the governor's power, he kept on exercising those presumed powers. And he went into district court and he sued the House of Representatives to have it declared that that provision of the Emergency Powers Law was unconstitutional. Well, I don't know if you saw it, but just this week, the Court of Appeals here in Baton Rouge, the First Circuit Court of Appeal, threw the governor's lawsuit out. I don't know if the media told you that. They gave lots of ink to the fact that he had sued the House of Representatives, but they haven't really told you that his suit was thrown out. It's no more. And there were some things about that suit. Number one, it was moot. But another thing that the court said was that you have to realize that the way the courts operate is once a statute is passed, it is presumed to be constitutional until there is a ruling that it's not. So when the governor ignored the statute, he did so before there was any court determination on the question. He just proceeded to operate in a lawless fashion. And he has, in fact, been the major lawbreaker in our state since March of 2020. And he should be in prison right now. Because he's done so many things to violate the rights of the people of this state. Closing thousands of businesses, closing churches throughout the state, taking away people's property, and leaving them penniless in many cases, and all without any legal authority, because these things have been done by and large. Almost all of them were illegal, unconstitutional, outside the Emergency Powers Law. Couldn't be done. There's also the provision that Jill mentioned in the Emergency Powers Law, which is section, it's RS, Revised Statutes 29:736D, and that's the part that says nothing in here shall be used to diminish the rights spelled out in the Declaration of Rights of the Louisiana Constitution or the Bill of Rights of the U.S. Constitution. Now that language is really superfluous in a sense, because if that language were not in there, the statute would have the same meaning. No statute can violate the Bill of Rights of the Constitution, federal or state. The reason I authored that provision, 736D, was authored and put in there to remind the courts, hey, whatever you may read into this statute, just bear in mind, nothing here can be interpreted to violate the Constitution, state or federal. 736D also says that Article 2 there about the separation of powers, that's still in effect. The statute doesn't change it. It says the court shall be open and none of the powers of the judiciary or the legislature shall be diminished. One footnote on that suit by the governor that's just important to show the lawlessness. You know, the legislature is not a juridical person. They can't be sued, but he sued them. The court didn't mention that, but the House of Representatives is not a juridical person that you can sue. So anyway, that case was thrown out. So what we've seen is a lawless government in action. You notice how many people have been prosecuted and put in jail under the Emergency Powers Act? There's really, that I know of, only one, and that was Pastor Tony Spell at Life Tabernacle Church in Baton Rouge. And I have great confidence that that case, which is lingering in the courts, up and down the courts, will ultimately be thrown out against Pastor Spell. And I hope that the civil suit in the federal courts for violation of civil rights will result in a massive judgment for that violation of religious liberty. Yeah. So why hasn't anybody gone to jail for violating these orders? Well, it's very simple, because the governor doesn't want it to go to trial. If he had people arrested, that means they would have all the rights of a criminal defendant, and this sham that he's put together would be exposed. So he just keeps, with the fervent support of the media, stressing that he has all these orders and all these powers. Just this week when he said that it was really interesting, because if you follow this controversy about masking in schools, and the fact that just a few weeks ago the State Superintendent of Education had said that he was changing the rules on quarantine when a child had been exposed to someone with COVID, that they would be allowed to continue in school unless the parents, or if the school had some other rules, they would be allowed to stay in school unless the parent or the school system had rules otherwise. And the governor didn't like that. He criticized it at the time. So when he supposedly lifted his mask order just two, 3 days ago, whenever it was, he said, but you can only lift the mask order in school systems that agree to go by my quarantine regulations. He said, I will allow you to open if you conform to my regulations, not the state superintendent. So what he was really doing, he was saying that I'm over the state superintendent. Now when you go into this Constitution, the powers of the state Board of Elementary and Secondary Education is spelled out. The local school boards are spelled, they are mentioned here as an important part of our constitutional right on education in our state constitution. But you will find nowhere in the state constitution or in their statutes anything that puts the governor in control of anything in public education. He has no power over the superintendent. He has no power over the elementary and secondary board, no power over local school boards. And this is really part of the separation of powers set forth in the Constitution. It's not only the three branches of government, but within the executive branch, the governor has no power over the Secretary of State, that's a constitutional office, over the Attorney General. None of the statewide officials, but also he has no power over the Public Service Commission or the Civil Service Board. These are all constitutional offices that he's just not over. But John Bell Edwards, this man who's sitting in the governor's mansion, or now he's off, where is he, in Sweden or somewhere with climate change? But he is presumed to be the commander-in-chief of our state. Now, he may be the commander-in-chief of our National Guard, but he's not the commander-in-chief of our state. He's the governor. He has limited powers. He can't tell the legislature what to do. He can't tell the courts what to do. He can't tell the Bessie what to do, or the PSC, or the Civil Service Commission. And even within his executive branch, he's limited too. And if you look at RS 29736D, what you really come to understand that the Emergency Powers Act is really about the governor's power over his portion of the executive branch. That's where his power is under the Emergency Powers Act. So those are a few things to understand about how our constitutional system works. It's not what the governor's portrayed. He does not have unlimited power. He doesn't have lawmaking power. So, having said that, why don't I open it up for questions?
Grab the microphone.
And if you don't have any questions, I'll ask myself some questions.
We've got some.
But there'll be questions I can answer.
Yeah, we've got some.
Do you have one?
No, I was just saying there was some questions.
Miss Jill has a question.
Okay.
You haven't taught me this yet, Woody. How do we arrest the governor?
It might be hard. You might need maybe the sheriff and the district attorney in East Baton Rouge Parish to be in on such a plan. I'm not sure. You have to have law enforcement willing to do it. There has to, the governor was impeached. That was Huey Long. And A lot of people don't know about why he was impeached, but he was impeached. They drew up it was like a bill of, it's an indictment basically, with charges, and the first one on there was solicitation to murder. Did you know that? And what it was about was his bodyguard. He had told one of his bodyguards to kill someone, one of his political opponents. The bodyguard went to the DA. The DA wouldn't do anything, so they went to the legislature, and that's how the whole thing came about. I think there ended up being 13 charges. But there was no trial ever in the Senate because of the round robin. Enough senators, more than 1/3, signed a document saying we will not, no matter what the evidence is, we're not going to convict him. But it's hard in our system to go against a governor. You have to have public officials with a lot of courage. Is there grounds to? Yes, to me this is like, it's like a RICO violation under federal law. There are a lot of people here who have conspired to take away our liberties, to take away our property, and it's a massive civil rights violation that has occurred. Let me mention one thing about vaccines, because I know that's something that's on the tip of everybody's tongue right now. As to students, it's very clear. When the president of LSU had a news conference and there was other presidents of universities saying everybody's going to be vaccinated, what a joke that was. Don't they have counsel who even read the statutes? I mean, this is something else that I had the privilege of authoring. It's, 17:170, I think, which it clearly says that any student, kindergarten through graduate school, the parents or the student even just has to sign a written dissent saying they're not going to take the vaccine. There's also a provision for religious exemption, but it doesn't have to be religious. You can just say, I'm not taking it, and there's nothing they should be able to do under the statute. Now, I have some breaking news I want to tell you. I don't think you've heard it because it just happened, but maybe you have. You're going to take away my thunder if you do. But I just got a call from Jimmy Fairclough. I don't know if you know who Jimmy is, but he's a very important attorney from Alexandria. He served as general counsel to Governor Bobby Jindal for 2 years. And he's representing physicians and nurses in Lafayette who are suing auctioneers and Our Lady of Lourdes for the threats against them to be terminated. He also is representing a number of doctors and nurses and all like that in a case. It's called Hayes versus University Health Shreveport, doing business as auctioneers LSU Health Shreveport and auctioneer LSU Health Shreveport, St. Mary Medical Center. So that was in district court. Judge Marcotte, I think it is, gave an adverse decision. In the district court, he said that Jimmy Fairclough and his plaintiffs had no cause of action. They just had to eat it, but that's not true. There's a section of the Bill of Rights, and I happen to author this one too. It was Article 1, Section 5, called Right to Privacy. And it prohibits unreasonable searches and seizures, as in the federal Constitution, but it adds are invasions of privacy. So invasions of privacy are prohibited. And what has happened since the 1974 Constitution was passed is there's a whole series of cases all the way up and down our courts, district courts, courts of appeal, and the Louisiana Supreme Court that say you cannot force a medical treatment or a drug on an employee. You simply can't do it under well-established Louisiana law. So what Jimmy Fairclough and his attorneys have been doing is simply going and say, you know, whatever that you're hearing from the governor or from auctioneers or whatever, auctioneers saying, well, we're private, we may receive $100 million or so, saying we're private. That doesn't apply because our long-established jurisprudence in Louisiana, may not be true in any other state, I don't know, but in Louisiana, Article 1, Section 5 prohibits invasions of privacy, and from a medical standpoint, that's been interpreted to mean any invasion of your privacy with drugs or forced vaccines or anything like that. So here's the breaking news. Court decision released just a few minutes before you began your meeting, and this is from the Second Circuit Court of Appeal in Shreveport, 3-judge panel. They made a ruling. Now bear in mind that the evidence has not been heard. The district judge would not allow a real trial. This is all on preliminary motions on whether this is a cause of action and so forth. But Jimmy Fairclough and his clients had asked for a temporary restraining order to prohibit auctioneers and these other defendants from enforcing their mandatory vaccine. And they asked for a temporary restraining order. And here's what happened today. The judges said that they are rejecting the district court's ruling of no cause of action. That's not appropriate in this case, they said. And it said, thus, the denial of the request for a temporary restraining order, which would have preferred hearing under the legal process, was an error, as was the sustaining of this exception, no cause of action, and the dismissal of the petition with prejudice. Accordingly, this writ by Jimmy Faircloth and his plaintiffs is granted, and the October 12th and October 20th rulings are reversed. The matter is remanded to the trial court with instructions to enter a temporary restraining order stopping the forced vaccination and any disciplinary action, including termination for unvaccinated employees, effective October the 29th. And they are directing Judge Morcott to hold a hearing on this trial, on this matter. So this is a tremendous issue today.
Woody, thank you so much for bringing that information to us.
Did you hear?
Yes, we can hear you. Can you hear me? Isn't that wonderful? The audience was clapping for you too. We thank you so much for sharing and releasing that information to us. And community, we also have things like that going on here in Ouachita Parish. We have attorneys lined up to help parents. We're just waiting on the parents to come forward and want to fight this. And not.
Well, may I say this, that this ruling is the highest ruling so far on this situation, Second Circuit.
Yes.
And this has implications for every employer in the state of Louisiana, public or private. Now let's suppose you're a federal contractor, for example. Joe Biden is trying to impose these vaccines on you. But if you're a federal contractor that you work for is a Louisiana business, or if you are employed in the state of Louisiana by a Louisiana business, this is going to apply to you. So it's not just options. When you read, if you go to centralcitynews.net, I'm the editor and publisher of Central City News, you'll see our archives, you can see all our past issues. Look at the current issue, and you'll see in the left part of the paper, I mean, it's 24, 26, something like that, 28, you'll see a couple pages of, we reprinted the brief that Jimmy Faircloth and his team of attorneys filed in this case, and I'm telling you, the law is ironclad against forced vaccinations in the state of Louisiana. From order of their employer.
Thank you. $200 that's being charged for spouses that are unvaccinated.
I'm gonna let you ask that. What do you think about the $200 fee or charge per month for spouses of Ochsner's employees that are unvaccinated? Wow.
Well, I think in general, and I don't practice law, but in general, I would say you cannot, when someone is exercising a right, that's a constitutional right, in this case it is under Article 1, Section 5, you can't have any punitive actions against them. That would be prohibited. So that's all that is. That's punitive. We're going to tax the health insurance on the spouse. And as we said, we know factually that vaccinated and unvaccinated in terms of transmissibility and all like that's not that different. So there's no real justification. It's just a punishment. Doctors have been terrible. They're also the ones who went out East Jefferson Highway and trying to vaccinate people. As far as I'm concerned, I will never go to Ochsner's or anything the rest of my life. And what's going on? Dr. Alton Ochsner Jr., who was a famous heart surgeon, was a very close friend of mine. He was a very conservative person, and he would roll over in his grave if he knew what Ochsner name was happening. Now, I don't know how it is in Monroe or Shreveport, but in Baton Rouge, as I understand, we have two hospitals that are trying to force their employees, and that's Ochsner's and Our Lady Lake. And then we have three that are not. We have Women's Hospital, we have Lane, and we have Edgar General. So here, at least, we can all get sick and go to for those hospitals if we want to. We don't have to do this for the tyrants who are trying to vaccinate people who don't want to get vaccinated.
Well, Woody, thank you so much for your time and for all of our technical difficulties trying to get you on and the doctors on. We appreciate your time, and we're going to turn it over to Danny McCormick at this time.
Hey, listen, I want you to know this. I want you to know this. We are going to win. I promise you that.
Thank you, Woody. Great man. I appreciate Woody. He is a legal mind, and it is nice to have him on our side. I'm not going to tell you about my grassroots organizing. You just want to take credit out, don't you? I'm going to reiterate what Woody said. We have the high ground. Just remember that. The people in this room is the one that history will remember as the good guys. That's simple. All we have to do, we have a constitution. The greatest constitution, the greatest legal document that was ever written by man. All we have to do is elect men and women that stand up for the rights of that constitution. That's all we have to do. You know, and just imagine if I'm standing here and I have a Bible in this hand and a Constitution in this hand. Now, the Bible is the inspired Word of God. But through history, people have perverted that Bible and have done it and twisted it to do things they shouldn't do. Those same people have taken away from this Constitution. That Bible is just as holy Word of God as it ever was. It doesn't matter what those people did to it. That Constitution is the same thing. Like I said, I'm from the country. When I decided something needed to be done, I researched every avenue of change in this country. I even researched revolutions. And what I've decided by my research is this right here. If we could fight a war and come right back to the same spot as we're standing today, we couldn't have a better document than the U.S. Constitution. All we have to do is elect men and women with backbone that will hold people accountable for that Constitution.
Come on.
So that's what I'd like to talk to you about tonight. How do we do that? I'd like to say one thing about that to start off with. But before we can save this country, we have to save Louisiana.
That's right.
And before we can save Louisiana, we have to save our hometown.
That's right.
Our greatest influence is in our hometown because these people know you. You meet them at the grocery store, you see them at school, you see them at church, and you can sit around and you can talk to these people and you can get a plan. That is what we have to do. The next thing is this. I brought my grassroots organizing to Baton Rouge when I got elected. I told them I drive 4.5 hours one direction for $1,100 a month. I leave my wife I've been married to for 38 years, my 2 kids and 6 grandkids. When I go down there, I don't care if they fire me. I just want to do the right thing. It don't matter to me at all. What I found out, the more I say what I think, the more people like it. It's very simple. I tell the leaders down there in Baton Rouge, just stand up and do the right thing. The people will love you. They will elect you governor. And they will not do it. We passed out a form tonight talking about forced vaccinations. You asked why. I'm going to answer that question. You can put it don't matter if you're talking about your school board, Baton Rouge, or what are you talking about. The first sentence talks about the narcissistic control freaks that want to control every move you make. People fall into that category. The second one, were most of the people that fall in the category of the Judases that have sold their souls for 30 pieces of silver. It's about money. Let me tell you specifically why Baton Rouge hasn't signed a petition killing the governor's emergency order. So what do we do? How do we do to take back, we know the problem. What is the solution? I like to say this, identify the problem, concentrating on the solution. Because if we just look at the problem every day, it would become overbearing to us. So we identify the problem, and we concentrate on the solution. What I did when I went to Baton Rouge was started a grassroots organization called Operation Golden Arrow. What I just found out is when I started grassroots organizing, is we'd have meetings like this and we'd leave, and I didn't know how to contact anybody. So, like when you signed in, you gave your email address, and what that will allow us to do is contact you in the future and let you know what is going on. So what we have started doing, I mean, I'm doing everything I can to get fired in Baton Rouge. I'm telling you, I'm fighting with the school board, I'm fighting with the County Parish Commission, and I'm ready to go back. They're fixing to build an Oshers in Bossier City. I'm fixing to go down and tell them to pull the permits on that, because we don't need a business that fires their employees. I don't know if you know it or not, Oshers denied a court order that wouldn't allow a sick, dying patient to have medicine. The judge said, ordered them to give them the medicine and they wouldn't give it to them. Ivermectin, that's correct. Yes, ma'am.
They just killed our son.
Right.
September the 25th, they murdered our son. I could say a lot on that. I have spoken on it, but I do want you to know that.
Well, I want you to pray about that, and I think those kind in the future, when you're ready to talk about it, those are the kind of testimonies that the people need to hear. I cannot imagine what it'd be to lose a son and losing a loved one and not doing anything, everything possible to save their lives. That's unimaginable to me. Yes, ma'am?
I don't care what I have to do. If I can just travel, I will advocate, I will stand, y'all can vote for me, I don't care. I'll have the backbone and I will tell it like it is. I will do it. I'm here, I promise, ask Tiffany. She's like, tell her to do it.
We fix it to teach you how to do it. And I do want to
fight for, and I just want to travel with you. I want to go there, I want to be there.
The one thing I found out when I started grassroots organizing, and nothing happened until the women get pissed off. And when they put the mask on the kids, the mama bears found, we're all, us men were jumping up and down and saying, we want to do this, we want to do that. And the women over there filling out the recipe to poison somebody. That's what. That's right. That's right. But let me tell you specifically what I'm doing. To win office, there's a technique to winning office. And I'll tell you one thing. This is the best to win office. I'm going to tell you the most important thing. When I started running for office, I went to this organization taught you how to run for office. They say you put everything over here in one pile. TV ads, billboards, mailers, everything you want to do. And over here in this other pile, you put knocking on doors. You knock on doors, you look people in the eye, you introduce yourself, and I say, I'm Danny McCormick, born and raised in this area. Got a wife, 2 kids, 6 grandkids. I got skin in the game. You know what I mean? I said, what happens to this District 1? I said, all my family lives in District 1. My business in District 1. When you elect me, you elect somebody else want to fight for you because I'm fighting for my kids just like you're fighting for yours. So what we're going to do, and Monroe, I've been watching y'all. I've watched every one of these videos like 2 hours long. I'm sitting like in the bed watching him. I watched this girl in her first video she shot, and I just loved it. You know what I mean? I said, I'm like brush fires of liberty are popping up. And somebody like me, I like running over here to Monroe and blowing that fire. But I'm going to tell you, I hadn't even come along this fire. Y'all are I'm very proud of what y'all are done. But we're going to do what we call Liberty Candidate Academies. And right now we have 2 on schedule. One in Shreveport and one in Ruston. And that's where we're going to teach you how to win these elections. We're going to teach you how to pick these candidates. We're going to teach you how to get out and take your nation back by taking back your hometown. Because we live in a republic. We said the Pledge of Allegiance a while ago. Pledge allegiance to the republic and to the republic for which it stands. If we say we pledge allegiance to the democracy, republic. Right. In a republic, the rights and the responsibility belongs to the individual. And up to a few years ago, I was uninvolved. I had two fears, one of heights and one of speaking in public. You see, God delivered me from that. Still scared of heights, we're working on that one. But that's what it's about. We're going to bring those Liberty Academies to your hometown. We're going to teach you how to organize. We're going to teach you how to run for office. And we're going to teach you to be the school board member. In a republic, the people have to get involved. And it only takes an irate minority to get involved. The people have to get involved. And you know, one thing, I talked to Jill. I love her. She's so much smarter than me. But I told her, Jill, I said, you know, if we don't lose every bit of our liberty, we'll have to get all of our liberty back. That's right. And that's where we're at. We're at the tipping point. That's right. So, I think that's about all I had. Yes, ma'am.
I look around and I see something missing here tonight. You know what's missing?
You.
What?
I'm not going to answer that question, even though I know the answer to it.
Well, I think it's missing is there are no black people in this building. And we can't do this without unity. And I don't know how they should go about opening the doors to that, but I think it's necessary.
And I will tell you this is my experience. In the liberty-minded people, who took groups that are most unvaccinated? The Christian, conservative, whites, and the inner city blacks. Neither one of us trust the government. You know what I mean? That is a barrier, that is a wedge that's been drove in our community, and we've got to win that back. I guarantee you, when I ran for office, I had a lot of different nationalities in my community, and I went and sat down and talked to them. And as long as I don't use the word conservative, they believe everything I believe. But if I walked up here today and said, hey, I woke up today and said, hey, I'm a liberal, I'd like to tell you something. Would you stop listening? That's what happens in the community. That word conservative has such a negative stereotype that you can't use it. Just talk about it. Talk about their sons and their daughters. Let me talk about this. Governor Edwards and a large amount of the Democrats didn't support a bill that only would let biological females play female sports. First of all, whoever thought we'd have to run that bill? The second thing, what community do you think is going to lose scholarships to colleges more than anybody? So that's right. So those doors are going to open up, and we've got to be able to show them that, hey, you know, Republican, Democrat, it doesn't matter. We all have skin in the game. We all have family members, and we've got things on the line here, and that's a very, very important part, and I agree with you 100%. But that's something we've got to work on.
That's right.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I own a local business, and normally when people come into my business, I talk to them about hunting, or I talk to them about the weather, or I talk to them about some item that I have that I need to buy. But lately, no matter who it is, I've been talking to them about politics, which is not my thing. I don't do that. I really don't. But it's so concerning lately that I've been doing it, and there's a lot of different ethnicities coming out, and I've been talking to them over and over about the concepts that they believe in and what they have seen and heard, and it's so different. It's so different, and I'll just suggest to them, you know, you might research that. You might just check it out, because I don't trust it. And you know, it's a lot of people that have, you know, I'm not saying they went and changed their mind, but, you know, it's eye-opener.
It was easier for me to get a sign in a black person's yard than it was a white person. They're open to the message. I run a constitutional carry bill this year. I wonder what that was wrong with that. Constitutional carry bill this year. And there's a river range there in Shreveport that I went into. And you walk in there, there's just as many black citizens or more working in there and buying guns as white citizens. We're I mean, we're on the same page here. There's just a stereotype that we've got to break. And it's just one person, one love, one word of Christ.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, that's what it is. I mean, the love of Christ will show through you. And it's just one person at a time. And I agree. I think that's exactly right. Yes, ma'am. I'm sorry, I said.
Sometimes it can be as simple as starting a conversation. And I just do that everywhere I go through the power that God uses, you know, that's inside of me. But it can just be something as simple as saying, you know, we are not the divided States of America. We're the United States of America. And united we stand, divided we fall. And I've never had anybody at all, like you said, bristle up at me, you know, whenever I say something like that. And so it's just keeping communication lines open and really, you know, praying.
I agree. That's right. Yes, ma'am.
Recently, I've spoken at our school board. We're from Franklin Parish, and I was watching Washita Parish and some other parishes, little snippets and things showing different Patriot pages, and I have discovered something very ugly, and it's the same law firm that's giving everybody ill advice, really bad advice, and muzzling good school board members that I was shocked weren't fighting masks and mandates. And I learned that they represent the same law firm represents 60 of the 70 districts, and I just wondered how that's legal, how that's possible, how we let that happen, and what can we do about it?
The school board hires those attorneys.
Are they under contract? I mean,
And they may be, but I will tell you this, attorneys give you opinions that you want. My brother, when I go to attorney, that attorney does not give me an opinion I don't want, or fire him or hire another one. Those people need to fire their attorneys and get an opinion that they want.
That's right. That's exactly right.
Yeah, his name's Jeff Geis, and he knows everybody more than anyone in this room. John Geis. He knows more than all of us.
Right. I appreciate it. I'm going to stay until it's over with. Be glad to answer any questions I can. And by the way, if y'all didn't know it, I was a grassroots organizer.
Thank you so much, Danny. Yes, you need like a huge round of applause. What a sport. I mean, you've been so helpful, and what a team player you've been. Thank you so much, Danny. You know, like Danny was saying, we have to start locally. We have to fight locally. Mr. Aaron Hoyle is here, and he has just something real quick. We are trying to recall these officials, these elected officials that have no backbone, and we are trying to get, you know, people in those positions. Now, with that being said, we are going to be offering through Ms. Jen Kerrigan over here, her Louisiana Save Our Schools. She actually is a certified teacher for the Patriot Academy. And if you go to our website, parentschoicela.org, you can sign up to do the Patriot Academy. And what that is we're going to learn what our biblical citizenship is, what the laws are, and everything. So this is going to go hand in hand to what Danny is going to be teaching, how to get into these politics, and then we're going to be learning the laws. So we're getting everything in one place. So here's Mr. Aaron real quick.
Okay. Can y'all hear me?
yes.
I was not prepared to speak, and following a lot of great presenters. And just want to take a second to thank everybody who made this happen. Thank you, Jill. Thank you, everybody from PCLA. Michael, Francesca, thank you, especially Tiffany. Tiffany, who always looks calm. She's like a duck. She looks calm up top. You know, she's paddling like hell underneath the water. So much Tiffany for making this happen. I think the doctor from Canada was incredible. So I'll try to make this short, but I didn't know I was going to talk. Look at my notes, so it's terrible. So yeah, my name's Aaron Hoyle. I'm a father of two in Washita Parish School District. I'm a Patriot. And I've spent the last few months trying to make life difficult for the Washita Parish School Board. As you all realize, the schools are the front lines in the fight against government overreach. And if you watch the videos, you'll notice that it was me that asked the school board straight up at the last meeting, will you reject the vaccine mandates when they come to Ouachita Parish? And they all sat there and they didn't say a word. Nobody had the courage to say anything. The attorney that you talked about, John Geis, he said the governor mandate, as opposed to what Woody Jenkins said, he said the governor mandate carries the weight of law. And that's supersedes law, so that's contrary to what Woody Jenkins said, who wrote the Constitution. So either our law firm does not know the law, or they're too damn lazy to go down to Baton Rouge and fight for the citizens that they're paid to represent.
Right.
And also, where's Lance? Lance Weatherby stood up and asked him a question. He had the insurance form, and he read the insurance exemptions to them. And that made them backtrack and said, well, we didn't say that you were going to lose your insurance. We said you risk losing your insurance. And just like Danny McCormick said, nobody wants to risk losing anything. And I don't think anything in life is worth anything without risk. Sorry, I lost my place here. So it's really easy to stand up for something when it doesn't require any action. But once action is required, people get real quiet and they disappear. So if there's one good thing that's happened over the past few months, at least in Ouachita Parish, is that we have exposed those people who claim to stand for freedom and claim to stand for liberty, but they really don't. When it comes time to actually stand up and do something, they're nowhere to be. So with that said, we need leaders that will use common sense and that will have the courage and the backbone to simply say no when something is suggested or something is demanded that is not right for the citizens of Ouachita Parish or is not right for our kids. And so with that in mind, like Tiffany said, we are trying to recall the school board. We would like to recall at least 4 seats so that we can get a majority. We're starting with District C, that's Scotty Wagner's district. I don't want to get into it, it's nothing personal against Scotty, but we had more concerned citizens reach out from District C than any other district. So we're starting with District C, and we have recall forms out front right there. If you'd like to take a recall form, if you know people in West Ouachita that you think you may be able to get signatures from, please do so. And if you haven't signed the recall, please do so. We really need your help. We need more signatures to get this guy out of office than he got votes to get in office. So it's a tough hill to climb. Thank you.
Thank you all for coming tonight. We're going to be out here. I think we have to wrap it up and be out of the building.